Hello, and welcome to a lecture on late 19th century ideologies and within the context of the Rose Revolution. Now, we have during this time a marketplace of ideas. There's a lot of ideas floating out there, and ideas coalesce and turn into ideologies. An ideology is a system of beliefs or a cluster of ideas grouped together under an ism, an ISM. And so, why are there so many ideas floating around during this time period? Well, the answer is because we have revolutionary social change. Things are happening. And there's a lot of people asking, why are these things happening and what does it mean to me? What does it mean to you? And how are the ideas being spread around? Well, there's a cheap, popular newspapers. Newspapers were quite cheap during this time, and that was the medium. So today, if the medium is the internet or television, at that time, the medium where ideas are floating around is within the newspapers, the broadsides, the magazines. And people can read these. And so it doesn't matter if you are the poorest of the poor or the richest of the rich, you have access to these ideas. And these ideas are asking questions like, what's going on? What should I care about? What should I do? Who are my enemies? And that will depend, of course, on where you are within the strata of society. Where is your place on the ladder? And so you'll have different answers to this depending on where you and your circle of friends and family and co-workers, where you fit in. You'll get sort of different answers. And out of these questions and other questions, you get the ideologies, and we got all these isms of capitalism and liberalism and social Darwinism and communisms, and one there at the bottom, the gospel of wealth. Which we'll be getting to. Now, most of these ideas and these ideologies, because it's such great economic changes, they're really looking at the spectrum, the left-right spectrum of the economics. And with America, sort of firmly on the right of free market labor capitalism. But because of the changes and the immigrants coming in and the ideas that are floating out there, there's a lot of people who want to pull the United States over to this side, over to the socialist or the communist side as well. And then there are, others sort of in between who feel that government should have a stronger role in ameliorating some of the disparities, some of the inequalities that are existing. And we've got to keep that in mind. There is such a great inequality of wealth at this time with, a super rich and the majority of people sort of working class or middle class. At this time. So some of the ideas that are floating around come from the top, and we get sort of these new attitudes towards money and towards wealth, and these were being propagated by like the wealthiest, like people like John Rockefeller or Andrew Carnegie, and one is this idea of social Darwinism, which is taking Charles Darwin's ideas and sort of putting them into a human context and a social context, and then the others that we call the gospel of wealth. So social Darwinism is saying, if you succeed in life, it's because you are the best. You are capable, you are the smartest, you work the hardest. And if we have government regulation and rules and everything, it's just going to upset this natural order of things. And it's going to elevate, the lowest of the low will be pushed up, which is wrong. If you are unintelligent or lazy, then you should be at the bottom of society. And why do we have people at the bottom of society? Why are they there? It is because they are lazy, and it is because they are not intelligent. And why am I, John Rockefeller, why am I so wealthy? It's because of my intelligence. It's because of my work ethic, and so that's why I'm wealthy. And they see any kind of like socialism or any kind of like expansion of the role of government to regulate and to maybe distribute wealth. They see this as unnatural and dangerous as an idea. Now, the gospel of wealth, this was very much propagated by Andrew Carnegie, who wrote an essay simply titled Wealth. And it's sort of saying, I'm wealthy because I've been sort of chosen by God. I'm within God's favor because I'm a good person. And again, this idea that the poor are lazy and inferior, but he takes it a little step further and says, I have been entrusted with this money, and I must use my money to do good. And Carnegie sort of said, okay, what should I do with my money? And he was really obsessed with this question. And he sort of said, well, I could give it to my children, but then my children will just become degenerates. They'll become snobs. They'll be uncaring people. Now, Andrew Carnegie had come from not poverty, but he wasn't very well off as a child, so he knows what it's like to just be sort of the common person. And he doesn't want his children to be these haughty, aristocratic kinds of people. So he says, okay, I will not give the money to my children. So should I bequeath it and give it to the state, to the government, to use it as they may see fit, to do some public goods? Well, he said, well, then my wealth might end up in dirty hands through corruption, or it might be used for ill good. So he said, the only thing I can do is for me to use my money now to do good things. And he invested millions and millions of dollars into public goods, like libraries is the main thing that he built. Like he provided thousands of public libraries throughout the United States and Canada and England as well. So both of those ideas sort of say the wealthy are wealthy because of their superiority in some way, and the poor are poor because of some sort of inferiority for them in some way. And both of them don't really want to see any kind of government regulation coming in. On the opposite spectrum, if we go to the extreme other side, is we have these other isms of socialism or anarchism or communism. And all of them sort of are anti-capital and pro-labor in some way. And these ideas are most commonly seen within the immigrants' newspapers, often in Yiddish, a Jewish language, Russian, or just sort of non-English languages. And socialism is sort of the idea that use the state to improve society, to alleviate the worst conditions of capitalism. A lot of regulation and sort of laws to raise wages, to improve safety, to reduce working hours, and to help the working classes, and to create a more egalitarian society. Anarchism sort of opposes all authority, particularly state authority or any sort of hierarchy, and would like to see sort of work, the factory being everybody contributing equally without sort of the boss elevated up above the working class. And then communism is taking it to the extreme, saying that there's this mass group of working class people that will have a revolution, ending up with them owning the means of production, the land and the factories and the trains, that it all become a common ownership. And these ideas are being spread around as well in books, and two books in particular. The first is Edward Bellamy's book called Looking Backwards, which is an interesting book and still widely read today, and was a very popular book in its time. It was the third largest bestseller of its time, after Uncle Tom's Cabin and another book called Ben-Hur. And it influenced a number of intellectuals, and you can see its influence in a lot of Marxist writings. Karl Marx's, not his writings, but people who are in favor of Karl Marx and his ideas. And it's the book of a young man who falls into sort of a deep sleep in the year sort of 1880 or so, and then wakes up many years later in the year 2000. So it's sort of looking, let's look ahead way into the future. And this world that he wakes up to is a socialist paradise where all of these socialist ideas have come to be, and everybody is living in this great, great world. And when he wakes up, he easily finds a guide, someone who's going to show him around, and who explains all the advances of this new age. Reduced working hours. Nobody's doing, sort of menial jobs. There's even like an internet-like delivery of goods. Everybody retires with all the benefits at the age of 45. They can eat in any of the public kitchens that are around. The productive capacity of the United States is all nationally owned, and the goods of society are all equally distributed to its citizens. And it was a very, very influential book, as was this book, Henry George's Progress and Poverty, who's asking these questions. Why do we have so much wealth, yet so much poverty? How are these two things existing at the same time? And why do we have these cycles of boom and bust? And there's the Panic of 1819, 1837, 1950s, and he was writing this book in the late 70s, so he would have had the Panic of 1873 very much on his mind. And he proposed a very simple solution. He said the solution is a single tax on land and property, and then through that tax you would distribute it out through all the people and improve. But despite the popularity of these two books, this book was also very widely read and influenced a great number of sort of future reformers and socialists in the United States and beyond. Why was socialism so unpopular in the United States? And it never really came to be that these socialist ideas never really took root. Communism, Karl Marx thought this revolution would occur in the United States, never did. Well, why? Well, for one thing, this American creed of equality. All men are born equal and equal in opportunity. And the idea of, the rags to riches, that if you just work hard and try to improve yourself as a person, that you can move up in society. So you live in a society where there is the opportunity of social mobility. So why tear it all down? Even if you are at the bottom of society, you have hope in it. There's always land to the west. You can always, now, this is sort of closing off, and it will sort of close off in the 1890s, but there's always been the opportunity, if things aren't working out where you are, you can always pack up and move west and to try your luck, maybe in gold mining or prospecting or in farming. You have a pretty decent life, even if you are at the bottom of society, in relation to those at the very bottom of society in Europe. And so the working class does have something to lose. There's political equality in the United States, which did not exist in Europe. In Europe, the movements for economic equality were in tandem at the same time as calls for more political equality, whereas in the United States, political equality had already sort of occurred through Jacksonian democracy and the common man being given access to the vote and to participation within the political arena. And then finally, the idea of social mobility, or the American dream, that you can have it. You can move up within society. Which brings us to our last slide. And the idea of social mobility is, Karl Marx had said history is about two classes. We've got the proletariat, which is the working class, and they've got a life of hard work and little material gain from it, and so they've got nothing to lose in a revolution, and they will be the ones who will lead a revolution, and they will go against the bourgeoisie, which is the middle and upper classes, those who, in his view, the management, the boss, and the owner, who have a life of ease and great material value. But this never came to be, and one of the reasons is society isn't as simple as us and them. This idea that we got these two classes and I'm in one and you're in the other, it's not like that. Within society, there's a wide, broad spectrum, and if you can think of this as the left side being the lowest in society, which would be during this time, the Chinese immigrants, Irish immigrants, African Americans, and many of the other sort of immigrants pouring in from Southern and Eastern Europe. They're on the left side, and on the right side is John Rockefeller and old wealth, white Anglo-Saxon Protestants, and there's people all across this spectrum. And where you fit in isn't as simple as this, us and them. And you can move around on it. And so, the majority of people are sort of on the left, and there's very few people on the far right, the Andrew Carnegies and the John Rockefellers, but you can move up in it, and you don't need to tear the whole thing down and recreate a whole new society. And so the idea of these extremes, communisms, were extremely unpopular, even amongst a lot of the working class, and among the middle class, extremely unpopular ideas. And so we do have, in general, two broad groups. Here we have a poor immigrant family crowded into into their tenement in New York City, and then you sort of got the middle or upper class sort of families. But for this family, now maybe I, as mother or grandmother, I'm not going to move up necessarily, but my children have great opportunity in this land, in this America. They're going to go to school, they're going to get an education, and then maybe they'll get the opportunity to learn a skill, to learn a trade, or maybe even go to university and become a lawyer or a doctor, or they can maybe go into commerce or business, and if they tinker away and come up with a new idea or a new invention, they can get great wealth. And there's always that opportunity, and this opportunity is what's sort of closing the door on communism and socialism in the United States as a popular idea, despite the popularity of books like Looking Backward or Progress and Poverty. And the idea of just work hard, you can have the American dream, that's a very popular idea as well within this marketplace of ideas. All right, thank you very much for listening.